Welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. Today, we're taking you on a wild ride back to the Cold War with Operation ElDorado Canyon. Think of it as a high-stakes, international game of hide-and-seek. This top-secret mission had it all. Covert ops, daring pilots, and a plot twist worthy of a spy thriller. So, grab your trench coat and dark glasses, and let's unravel the mystery of Operation ElDorado Canyon. This is Scarlet Tavern. Alright, so Operation ElDorado Canyon. We are doing a little bit of history, mostly because we are recording this on 4th of July. This will release a few days after. But so we want to say Happy Independence Day to all of our red-blooded Americans. And to Britain, you can go fuck yourselves.
Actually, I agree with that, but in case of ElDorado Canyon, they did us a solid on this one. They were probably the only ones who did.
There's a first time for everything. And if you're really in the spirit of 4th of July, go to your cabinet, grab some tea, and go throw it in some water.
I did that earlier, but I did drink it though.
You're not supposed to drink it.
Okay.
That's the whole point. All right. Shortly after Ronald Reagan assumed the presidency in 1981, Libya emerged as a significant concern for the U.S. administration. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, known for his staunch anti-Israel stance, actively supported militant groups in the Palestinian territories and Syria. Reports suggested that Libya was seeking nuclear capabilities, heightening U.S. anxieties, especially as Gaddafi occupied uranium-rich Chad. His aspirations to establish a federation of Arab and Muslim states in North Africa further exacerbated U.S. fears about regional stability. The then U.S. Secretary of State, Alexander Haig, advocated for preemptive actions against Gaddafi, particularly in light of evidence that he employed ex-CIA operatives, notably Edwin P. Wilson and Frank E. Turple, to establish terrorist training camps. Now, we'll kind of touch on them for a few because they're two pretty interesting guys. So Edwin P. Wilson and Frankie Turple were former CIA operatives who became infamous for their involvement in illegal arms dealings and other clandestine activities. Edwin P. Wilson started his career in the CIA in the early 1950s, working primarily in logistics and procurement. Meaning he was all about if the CIA needed something found and gotten for them, he was the one to do it. He would go and they would say, hey, we need a crate of SKSs. And he would be the one to go, okay, I know exactly who to talk to. And he would go do that. It's kind of the precursor to his illegal arms dealings. Yeah. So Wilson exploited his intelligence connections to sell weapons and military hardware to Libya during the 1970s and early 1980s. His activities went beyond arms sales. He was also involved in providing training and expertise to Libyan intelligence and military forces. In 1982, Wilson was arrested and later convicted on multiple charges, including exporting firearms and explosives to Libya without permission, and for attempting to have witnesses and prosecutors killed. He spent over 2 decades in prison before some of his convictions were overturned due to prosecutorial misconducts, leading to his release in 2004. Now, Frankie Turple, also a former CIA operative, engaged in similar activities. After leaving the agency, Turple turned to the private sector, where he gained notoriety for his role in providing training, equipment, and expertise to despotic regimes, notably that of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. His operations included not just arms dealings, but also the provision of tools and advice for internal repression, including torture. Turple fled the U.S. in the late 1970s to avoid prosecution and lived in various countries, offering his services to various controversial clients. His whereabouts were often unknown, and he was rumored to have died in Cuba in 2016. And I believe even to this day, we don't even know what happened to him. He just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, he just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. I mean, even before that, he was rumored to have died in a couple other countries. I believe Edwin Wilson, I looked up, he actually just, 2012, he actually died of a heart condition in Seattle. But he had actually been living with his brother. As we've seen in previous episodes, they had a funny hiring practices. A lot of guys that went on to do some pretty shady things in the CIA.
Yeah, and I want to note that Edwin P. Wilson, we didn't say it, but he wasn't just former CIA. He was also a naval intelligence officer before that. So he started in naval intel and then went to the CIA. So that's a big notation in there. And I believe, let me just double check, but I believe Turple was too at some point. No, I'm sorry, he was just CIA. But he was, yeah, it's rumored that he died March 1st, 2016 in Havana, but nobody really knows. He was a spy. I mean, he knew how to disappear. So some people believe he faked his own death and he's still alive. So we would never, the world may never know. So the situation escalated following the terrorist attacks at Rome and Vienna airports in December 1985, which resulted in 19 deaths and roughly 140 injuries. In response, Gaddafi expressed his intent to persist in backing groups like the Red Army faction, the Red Brigades, and the Irish Republican Army. Framing his support as a countermeasure against European governments he claimed were backing anti-Gaddafi Libyan factions. Now, keep in mind that Irish Republican Army, this is also known as IRA, one of the largest terrorist organizations in the world, let alone in Ireland. IRA, they're supposed to be defunct at this, now, but the rumor is that the IRA is actually making a comeback in Ireland right now. So they're saying a lot of arms dealings and stuff happening in Ireland, and really the only reason that would be happening is to go to the IRA. And then everybody else, Red Army faction, Red Brigades, they're, again, all anti-government terrorists groups.
Yeah, most of these were communist-leaning terrorist organizations, very active in especially West Germany. Actually, I believe what Red Brigades and Red Faction originated out of West Germany. These guys have been responsible they're terrorists. They're defined as terrorist organizations mostly because of their ideology, but many of their activities are more reminiscent of gangs. Really, a lot of bank robberies, arms dealing, assassination for hire, stuff like that. I believe Red Faction was responsible for kidnapping, although we successfully got back, kidnapping a U.S. Army general in Italy during the 70s, I believe. But yeah, Gaddafi was very big in supporting them. Various training camps in Libya were exclusively for them.
Now, keep in mind, Red Brigades are Italian. So, yes, they were mostly in Italy. They were an Italian Marxist-Leninist group. They were also known as the Combatant Communist Party. So, mostly a militant guerrilla group. So, one of their big things was the kidnapping and murder of Aldo Moro in 1978. We could do an entire thing on the Red Brigades, IRA, which we may do a whole thing on militant groups or guerrilla groups, stuff like that. But yeah, so for years, the U.S. engaged in intermittent confrontations with Libya over its territorial claims to the Gulf of Sidra. By March 1986, escalating tensions prompted the U.S. to consider a more forceful response. Asserting international law's 12 nautical mile limit for territorial waters, the U.S. deployed a carrier task force to the region. In response, Libya executed aggressive maneuvers on March 24th, leading to a naval clash in the Gulf of Sidra. On the evening of April 5th, 1986, a devastating explosion shattered the lively atmosphere of a West Berlin discotheque. Sorry, that's such a weird one to say. Discotheque, heavily frequented by U.S. servicemen. It's a place to party. It's
a club.
Yeah, it's a club. I don't know why they say that. Welcome to Germany. But the blast caused severe structural damage, plunging partygoers into the cellar as the dance floor collapsed. The tragic incident resulted in the deaths of 2 individuals at the scene, 29-year-old Turkish woman Nermin Haney and 21-year-old U.S. Sergeant Kenneth T. Ford. A further casualty, U.S. Sergeant James E. Goins, succumbed to his injuries later in the hospital. The explosion also left over 200 people wounded, including 79 Americans. This attack occurred against a backdrop of escalating tensions between the United States and Libya. Just a few weeks prior, in March 1986, the U.S. had engaged in a naval confrontation with Libya in the Gulf of Sidra, resulting in the sinking of 2 Libyan ships. In the wake of these events, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi had publicly urged attacks on U.S. interests. The U.S. government was swift to attribute the bombing of the club to Libyan sponsorship, claiming to have exact, precise, and irrefutable evidence that Gaddafi's regime was behind the attack, framing it as a retaliatory act by Libya against U.S. military actions. Further insights emerged when the Stasi archives were examined after Germany's reunification. These investigations led to the identification and subsequent prosecution of the Libyan agents responsible for the nightclub bombing. They had operated from the Libyan embassy in East Germany, and their actions were scrutinized and addressed by German courts in the 1990s. In the planning stages of a strike mission against Libya, the then secret 4450th Tactical Group of the U.S. Air Force was put on alert to deploy stealth operations. By this time, over 30 F-117 Nighthawk stealth attack aircraft were stationed at Tonopah Test Range Airport in Nevada under the command of the Tactical Air Command. However, the stealth capabilities of the F-117 were so classified that even senior officers in the European command were unaware of the aircraft's existence. The F-117 is one of my favorite planes of all time.
So cool.
It is amazing. My grandfather was actually part of Tactical Air Command for a little while. He moved around a bit, but my grandfather was a loadmaster on C-130s and 141s. And this is declassified now, so I can talk about it. But when he was during the 80s, he was part of a group that they were testing just dropping nukes out of C-130s and 141s. They were going to take small nukes, mini nukes, and drop them out of C-130s and 141s. Just drop them. And it turned out that it was going to be too complicated for calculations and all of that to get it right. So they decided not to do it. Plus, C-130s and 141s would not have been able to get out of the blast radius quick enough. So they stopped doing it. But my grandfather was involved in all of the test runs. He did all the calculations, all of that stuff. But yeah, my grandfather was part of the Tactical Air Command for a little while.
Yeah, I guess, it could work. If you're just willing to sacrifice the air crew. You loaded with a bunch of guys you don't like. It's like, yeah, you'll be fine. It'll be great. Strike one for America. We'll never see those guys again.
There's a reason the United States does not do suicide bombs.
Yeah.
Because we actually care about our... Well, supposed to care about our people. But the mission was initially set to utilize the F-117s, but within an hour of the planned launch, Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger canceled the stealth component of the strike. Weinberger's decision was driven by concerns over potentially exposing the highly secretive aircraft and its technological advances. Consequently, the operation proceeded with a conventional aircraft from both the U.S. Navy and the Air Force. The existence of the F-117 remained concealed from international awareness for several more months, only becoming public knowledge in 1988 and later gaining significant attention during Operation Desert Storm. Now, here's the funny thing. If they would have used the F-117s successfully, there would have been no people to tell you that F-117s were used. Mm-hmm. If you do it right, leave no witnesses behind, it's still a secret. Mm-hmm. The operational logistics for the Libyan raid were complicated by political and diplomatic challenges. The U.S. was denied overflight rights by France, Spain, and Italy, and also could not use bases on the European continent. This situation forced the U.S. Air Force to reroute their portion of the mission around France and Spain, passing over Portugal and through the Straits of Gibraltar, in addition of approximately 1,300 miles each way. This extended route necessitated multiple aerial refuelings. The refusal from France alone had about 2,800 kilometers to the journey. French President Francois Mitterrand's decision was influenced by a preference for a more decisive action against Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, contrasted with the U.S.'s more limited approach. Additionally, lingering tensions over the U.S.'s non-participation in a planned retaliatory strike on Iranian positions following the 1983 Beirut barracks bombings also played a role in France's decision. Now, this is funny because I took Ben and Pam last year to the Air Force Museum, and we actually talked about this specific thing when we were sitting down for lunch. I don't know if you remember talking about that, but we were talking about, because we had just seen half of these planes, mm-hmm. and you were talking about how we had to do the whole rerouting because we couldn't fly over, so we had to fly all the way the fuck around, had to do in-flight refuels and go all the way around. It was an extra 1,300 miles that they had to go around instead of just cutting straight across because they would not let us use their airways.
Now, this is a surprising turn I learned. I assumed the French was like, oh, no, we do not want to piece of the Libyans. In fact, it was actually the opposite. The French wanted a more militant response. They wanted to kill Gaddafi. They wanted to eliminate his government, occupy Libya, make sure that this could never... Basically, they wanted Gaddafi gone. Reagan didn't want to do that. For years leading up to this, he kept talking tough on Libya, but he didn't do anything. And finally, when he did something, France was like, okay, we're going to take him out. And they're like, no, we're just going to bomb some of his stuff. And then France was like, you know what? Talk to us when you're actually grab some cojones and want to do this.
So what you're saying is the French actually had more balls than the U.S. in this situation?
Yeah. I mean, realistically, politically, France was willing to actually put it all on the line and go and no, we're going to take him out for good. Reagan didn't want to do that. Now, again, Reagan just didn't want to, he didn't want to occupy a Middle Eastern country, kind of like what they did in Lebanon, where next thing you know, Hezbollah is suicide bombing the U.S. barracks, killing hundreds of Marines and French soldiers. And as they said, then when the French want to retaliate, Reagan he just wants out of the situation. So this was France's response was well, fuck you, America. And they just wouldn't let him go there. Now, Spain and Italy were more, we get most of our oil from Libya and we don't want to piss Gaddafi off. So they just wouldn't allow us to do that. So that's kind of this. I was really shocked. I was like, oh, wow, France really just wanted to throw down.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, just send the French Foreign Legion in, let them take them out. That's literally what they're designed for. So for those that don't know, we can actually do an episode on the French Foreign Legion because they have a lot of history. So the French Foreign Legion is really interesting because they are not technically not associated with the French government. They are, but they're not. They're basically what we call a wet work team. You send them in there to do stuff that you don't want your actual military to handle, stuff that the rules don't allow. But the cool thing is you technically have to be a French citizen, but they give you French citizenship, is what it is.
So you have to be you're only allowed to be a foreigner. The French Foreign Legion will not officially recruit a French citizenship. Now, a French citizen can join, but he will join under Belgium or Switzerland. He cannot be France. It's by law. French citizens cannot initially join. And you're right, after their term, they do get French citizenship, or if you're wounded, you get French citizenship and everything like that. But no, they only exclusively hire foreigners because the idea is, like you said, they send the foreigners in to do what they don't want to lose their actual military for. And, if they win, yay, more glory to France. If they die, some foreigners die. Who cares?
Yeah, they so we actually have a lot of guys that have left the Navy SEALs, the Green Berets and stuff like that, and they will go on to the FFL and operate there for a little while and then retire in France and spend the rest of their life in France. And the FFL has been behind quite a bit of stuff. We won't get into it because, like I said, we can do an entire episode on them. Because they're behind quite a bit of stuff, even involving a lot of United Nations stuff, and so we'll do an entire episode on them. But yeah, they literally could have sent the FFL into this and taken out Gaddafi and been done. On April 14th, following several fruitless negotiations with European and Arab nations, and prompted by the death of an American serviceman, President Ronald Reagan authorized an airstrike on key Libyan targets. Targets identified for the operation included strategic military and command facilities deemed crucial to Libyan military operations both domestically and internationally. Now, the selected sites were Bab al-Azizi barracks in Tripoli. Serving as Muammar Gaddafi's primary command and control center, this complex was crucial for coordinating Libya's overseas operations and was seen as the nerve center of Gaddafi's military leadership. The Murat City Bilal in Tripoli, it was the training facility for naval commandos and combat frogmen. Its role in preparing elite units for operations made it a significant target in efforts to cripple Libyan military capabilities. The Matiga International Airport, this was utilized by Ilyushin II-76 transport aircrafts. This airport was instrumental in facilitating the movement and supply of military equipment and personnel, enhancing Libya's operational reach and logistical support. That's a massive aircraft.
Yeah.
If you've never seen that, it is huge. Then the Jamar Haya Guard Barracks in Benghazi. That's another one we can do too. Mm-hmm. An alternate command and control headquarters for Libya's overseas operations. It also housed a storage facility for MiG aircraft components, making it vital for maintaining Libya's aerial combat capabilities. Then the Benina International Airport, which was employed as a base by defending fighters. It was key to Libya's defensive air operations and played a critical role in the country's air defense strategy. And it was mostly because of the distance between Matiga International Airport and Benina. They had space between them that they were basically able to control all of Libya with those two airports.
Yeah, Benina Airport is actually in Benghazi. So Benghazi is the second largest city in Libya. These two cities essentially control Libya. You take these out, Libya is you've taken Libya as a country. So we're going to get into it. How they actually went about this it's this. I curse Hollywood for not making a movie about this.
Yeah, so like I said, these airports were just strategic, and it's why he chose these airports for operations, because they were crucial in controlling all of Libya, which is, again, why we're destroying them. So these targets were chosen to significantly disrupt Libyan military operations and to demonstrate a forceful response to perceived Libyan aggressions and support for terrorism. The strike aimed not only to curtail Gaddafi's ability to project power beyond his borders, but also to send a broader message of deterrence. You know, the broader message of deterrence would have been to kill Gaddafi, but well, we didn't have we had a president at that point that did not have balls to do anything. Now, the military raid on Libya commenced in the early hours of April 15th with the primary objectives of delivering a decisive message and diminishing Libya's capacity to support and train terrorist groups. This operation was a direct response to the escalating hostilities between the U.S. and Libya, particularly following the bombing of the West Berlin Party Center. Where I'm just, that's such a stupid word. With the U.S. attributed to Libyan sponsorship. Their strategic targets included key military and command centers within Libya that were believed to facilitate and enhance the country's ability to engage in and support terrorist activities globally. The raid aimed not only to cripple these capabilities, but also to signal the Libyan regime and the international community in the U.S. Resolve in combating state-sponsored terrorism. From the outset, the mission to strike Libya was fraught with logistical challenges. It was the longest in terms of both time and distance in U.S. military history, necessitating a flight plan that avoided continental Europe and spanned half the Mediterranean Sea. Adding to the complexity, there were numerous last-minute changes to the operational details. Initially, only about 6 F-111 fighter bombers were assigned to the mission, but decisions from the White House increased this number to 18, along with an additional 5 EF-111A Ravens. Those are amazing fucking planes.
So one little tidbit I actually forgot to add, and I'm kicking myself, but I'll mention it. There was a lot of excitement within the squadron, the 48th Tactical Air Wing, that actually was the main half of this mission to participate in this mission. People were desperate to get on there. Most of the officers at this point, with the exception of a small handful of the senior officers, had never experienced combat in their so far careers. There's one instance where a junior captain had actually came up to a lieutenant colonel and just slapped $100 bill in his hand. He said, "I got 9 more of those there waiting for you if you get me on this mission." The colonel told him no chance in hell, basically. They were just that desperate to get on this mission. And there was literally only 24 slots, and they had to very carefully pick who they were going to take with them. They didn't just take anybody on this mission. These people were picked amongst the 48th Wing.
So, yeah, F-11s are great. So the F-11 fighter bombers and the EF-111, they're more or less the same plane, just with a little bit of different capability. GD, General Dynamics, made both planes, but the EF-111A, the Raven, was also made by Northrop Grumman. So it was GD and Grumman together, which is why it is different. It's not F-111A, it's EF. That is one of my favorite fighter bombers. Unfortunately, we don't use them anymore. We got better and faster stuff. And those things actually were some of our cheapest. They only cost about $15 million a plane, which is super cheap. Now we're spending $60 to $70 million a plane, at least.
Take note, Air Force. You once had a way to cost effectively destroy the enemies of America, and now we're spending $1 billion each year for one freaking fighter plane. I don't care how cool it is.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, $15 million a plane was nothing. I mean, for the 80s, it was a lot of money. Now, compared to what we're spending now, it's nothing. Because we spend at least $40 to $50 million per plane now, depending on what the plane is. I mean, if you look at like our stealth technology, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, on them. So, but the situation was further complicated by leaks to the media just days before the mission, which forced the operation to commence at dusk to evade media scrutiny. Moreover, the inclusion of the U.S. Navy carriers USS America and USS Coral Sea, along with a carrier strike force, introduced additional layers of complexity. So carrier strike forces, for those that don't know, these are planes and helicopters, stuff like that were not designated for the actual mission. They're there in support. So if they bomb and these planes start getting attacked from the air and the enemy, like Libya, sending planes after us, they call in the carrier strike force, and these guys just start taking off, and just, these are like F-17s and stuff like that, F-18s that are just there to just obliterate things out of the sky to let these bombers do their job. We always have carrier strike forces on standby in any mission. We have them out in the sea right now for this whole fucking mess that's going on. There's strike forces at all times, and those guys are, if it sucks for the strike force guys because they're not allowed to drink, because they are on call at all times. If they are on that ship, they are on call at all times, because it is literally, hey, shit just went down, you need to go. And they have to run. They're in their jumpsuits 24/7. They run, they jump in a plane, they take off, they go.
Which in this case was just that. These ships, the Coral Sea and the America, were in their support craft were literally in ports in Italy, and then they were told, get to the Gulf now. And they had to just radio silence. They had to silently cross the Med to get to where they had to go and meet up to evade Libyan and the Soviets, because the Soviets used to park destroyers and surveillance ships off ports where U.S. warships were to monitor them. So they had to imagine moving two giant carriers groups across the Mediterranean quietly enough that you just evade it. You can't see them.
So essentially, these are just a strike force is there to fuck shit up and take names.
Yeah, so, and especially in this, so they're doing two simultaneous attacks. Benghazi and Tripoli were 600 miles apart from each other. So they're sending, I believe, we don't say it in here, but I believe USS America went to Benghazi and Coral Sea went to Tripoli. So they had to split. So Benghazi actually took longer to get there because it was going further. Or, I'm sorry, the USS America took longer to get there. Just slightly. I mean, these ships can, for how big they are, they can fucking move. Especially, they're going full sail. They're just booking it. But so these ships are 600 miles apart from each other, and they were in port together. So they're now having to do this travel, and then they're basically splitting, doing a 600-mile difference to do this support. So, and again, like Ben said, they had to navigate swiftly to the Gulf of Sidra to support these strikes. Now, amid heightened political tensions in Europe and the US over the response to Gaddafi's terrorist activities, timing was a critical element of this mission. The aircraft, taking off from England, faced a grueling 7-hour flight with stringent requirements for radio silence except for essential communications, making precise coordination and timing paramount. Any deviation in timing could expose the aircraft to heightened risks from SAM missiles, especially if they did not arrive simultaneously. So here's the thing. The training for this happened. This was a lot of training. So these guys were basically, for the training, they're training with no communications, because typically you are doing comm callouts when you're in a fighter plane and you're in a formation. You're calling out, saying, all right, we've got a bogey in front, blah, 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 whatever. Or T-minus 5 minutes till impacts, stuff like that. This, they could not do it. It was all about timing. So from what I've read about this, these guys they took off at a specific time. They made sure to have watches that were synced up to each other, made sure that they were right, and everything was done based off of that watch. They had to fly at the same speed as each other. If one of them was 2 miles an hour off, the bombing will be 10 minutes off. So that 2 mile an hour makes a huge difference when you're letting bombs loose.
Mm-hmm. So as we see, we're about to see, not everyone got the message, and timing was, again, as Kate said, a critical factor. Even if you're off by 5 minutes, if one flight gets there before there, yeah, that flight may be successful, but if there's a 5 minute delay, that's 5 extra minutes the Libyans have to arm their SAMs, look for a target, and then shoot it down. And now you've just lost, part of your flight because you were late.
And speaking of late, during one of the status checks, the urgency of the situation was underscored when a group commander reported, "We're late." This prompted a rapid reassessment of the refueling schedule. It was discovered that the KC-10 tanker crews were unaware of the critical nature of the waypoints and timing. Now, a KC-10 tanker, we still use variations of this. We don't use the actual KC-10 anymore, as far as I know. But the KC-10 is a massive fucking plane. The entire plane has fuel in it. And if you guys have ever seen any movies or TV shows where a fighter plane is in the air and a plane comes over them, a rod goes down in, and that is a KC-10 tanker. And what's cool is that's not automated. There is actually a person that is under the KC-10. They lay down and they have to literally aim this just right and get it in there. And there's actually a girl on TikTok that is a refueler. I don't remember. I'll have to find who she is. But she does videos of her doing the refuels, and it is amazing to see. So they were unaware of this. So to make up for lost time, they did a refuel at 400 knots. Now the typical is 300. So this is insanely fast, insanely hard. They are lucky that they were skilled enough to be able to do this.
Also, to keep in mind, this is not a training mission where there is a peacetime training mission. These aardvarks, that's the unofficial name of these planes. Is where they're just flying up there and like, okay, line it up, yeah, you're good. They are a full combat loadout, so they have to fly, firing thrusters at full speed just to make sure that the plane can fly more or less evenly. So imagine flying down the highway in a sports car and you have to refuel at top speed. You can't stop, you can't slow down, because again, you're running behind. Everybody needs to get there at the same time. And all the while you are in a very cramped little cockpit trying to stay awake, and you have to stay awake. You can't, and as we see, you can't even use autopilot.
Yeah, so sorry for the sounds of TikTok, but so the TikToker that we're talking about is Amanda Smith MI from what we were looking at. So she is an aircraft refueler. Now, you guys know how fast 400 knots is?
I actually don't. I meant to look that up.
460 miles an hour. So you multiply by like 1.51 something. 1.151. And that is miles per hour. So typically they're doing it at about 350 for refuels, 350 miles an hour. This is now at 460. So we don't really use the planes don't use knots really anymore. It's mostly the ships, but yeah. So this high-speed refueling was necessary because the F-111 Aardvark, while a robust aircraft with a proven track record from Vietnam, had limitations. Its autopilot feature could not be relied upon for extended periods or during mid-air refueling due to formation issues. So the fighters would be flying almost wingtip to wingtip for most of the journey. The pilots had to navigate and refuel using only the tanker lights as guides in the dark. Typically, refueling's done during the day, and they have bright lights that guide everything. Because they had to do everything under the radar, this was being done at night, and on the refueler, there are little yellow lights or red lights, depending on the refueler, that signify where the refueling arm is, and then there's one at the end of the arm. And the refueler had to use that light to find the refueling port and do this. The planes have to maintain a steady pace. If they move a centimeter, you can actually break that arm off and fuel's just being dumped. But yeah, so they were doing this at night. And the decision demonstrated the mission's high stakes and critical need for precision and adaptability in complex military operations. For many of the pilots, this was their first combat mission in their careers, as well as refueling in mid-air. One of the junior officers expressed this concern to one of the mission commanders, who quipped that he would learn by doing. So imagine you just get out of flight school. You're a newly commissioned officer. You learn what's cool, one of my favorite things, and I know this just from my grandfather, and I have some friends that are pilots, is when you graduate flight school, they have a whole ceremony where you learn what plane you get to fly. So you're not assigned a base when you're a pilot. You are assigned a plane, and you go to a base based off of what plane you get. So they literally sit there, and you can actually watch it on TikTok. There's a few of them. They sit there, and there's a big screen that shows what plane they get. So these guys would have sat there, F-111, and they're like, fuck yeah, I get to be a bomber. Yeah. And then they're like, hey, you get to do a critical high stakes mission that has to be done in silence that you've never trained for. And if you fuck this up, Libya will kill America. Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, let's learn by doing. Welcome to the military, people.
I would have literally probably been clenching my butt cheeks together or pissing my pants.
You actually couldn't, because they actually had to come up with their diet schedule and everything, because hey, guess what? There's no bathrooms in the plane, and there's no, contrary to popular belief, at least not at this point, there's no apparatus to go to the bathroom in your flight suit. So you're holding it.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so now they have bathrooms in your flight suits. They just like an astronaut does, they can actually do that. Typically though, when you're in a fighter plane, you're not flying that long. So you can usually hold it. The G's are going to make you hold it anyways. But these guys had to fly 7 hours before they even got to their mission, because they're flying from England to Libya. So they're they had to adjust their schedules. They would, from what I remember, they were eating granola bars, minimally drinking water. If I remember right, some of them did IVs and stuff to make sure they got enough nutrients and stuff before shipping so that they would not need to go to the bathroom. But basically, from what I heard, some of them wore diapers just in case.
Supposedly, they also had amphetamine pills as well for those who got really tired. Although supposedly none of them took it actually took it. They just were. It was like, here, just in case, and they're just like, I'm not taking that shit.
Here, just in case. All right, you're done with the mission. Everybody needs to take a mandatory drug test, and all of you popped, so you are all discharged. So despite facing numerous initial challenges, the strike group managed to coordinate effectively and rendezvoused with the 6th Fleet of the Gulf of Sidra. From the carriers USS America and USS Coral Sea, and E-2C Hawkeye was launched from each to extend the radar coverage against 2 operational theaters. And this is literally that. It is a radar plane. It would go low and slow, and high and slow, and just slowly fly over. And basically our radar that is on the carriers and the radar that's on the planes bounces off of that and then gets extended, so they can see a lot more stuff. I don't believe we use the E-2C anymore, but we have obviously very similar stuff. The carriers also launched a formidable array of aircraft, including some of my favorites. The A-6E Tram, the A-7 Corsair, one of my favorites. Here's my absolute favorite, the FA-18A Hornet, and the F-14 Tomcat, famously in Top Gun. That is what we see them flying. Top Gun is the Tomcats. These naval aircraft took off just as the F-111s appeared on radar, descending to approximately 500 feet to join up with the specialized anti-SAM Wild Weasel aircraft tasked with neutralizing Libyan air defenses around Tripoli. So if you've ever seen a Wild Weasel, it is one of the coolest things. Look up a anti-SAM Wild Weasel. It is literally made to avoid SAMs, and which are, for those that don't know, surface-to-air missiles. You see them in a lot of stuff. It's basically these big boxes, depending on where you're at in the time period. Big boxes, bunch of missiles, tracks radar, shoots down a plane. So these things were able to neutralize those, and their entire job was to send down a missile just to hit those and blow them up.
Yeah, these guys were insane. I mean, just as he said, I mean, most planes, you're supposed to avoid the missiles and dodge them. These guys are like, I'm going to go kill them. You had to be a special breed of crazy to be a Wild Weasel.
Yeah, these guys, they had missiles on their wingtips. They were about 3 to 4 feet long, and if that, maybe even longer. And they're literally, these SAMs are coming up, and they're avoiding them. They are like the premier aces, and they would get close enough and fire, take the SAMs out. So as the final operational checks were completed and the last refueling session before engaging in combat concluded, the fighters assumed their attack formations and proceeded towards the Libyan coast. However, not all aircraft made it to the final phase. Elton 44 encountered refueling delays and had to abort, while Harbo 72 and Elton 41 experienced equipment failures, further reducing the number of F-111s to about 20. Now, when we say Elton 44, Harbo 72, Elton 41, these are all call signs. Just like if, again, most people have seen Top Gun, Maverick, all of that, these are call signs. Usually they're not as elegant as Maverick and stuff like that. Usually they're also not given, or the pilot doesn't choose it. It's given to them, and it's usually a joke.
Yeah, these call signs were the various sections named after. So Harbo 72, that's just Harbo Flight and everything. As we're going to see, there's actually one. I mean, I really want to know where they got the idea for the Elton. I mean, that's a name. Harbo, I was kind of scratching my head, and there's one. I'll save it for later, but it's really goofy. It's really. I was like, oh god, who drew the short straw and got that name?
So these aircrafts accelerated to 600 miles an hour, heightening the tension among the crews, many of whom were embarking on, again, their first combat mission. And again, keep in mind that 600 miles an hour is out of the norm. These planes usually travel 300 to 400, not 600. In the high stress environment, communication among the crew members became terse and strictly professional. One pilot faced a minor yet distracting challenge when he dropped his mission checklist into a narrow gap below his seat, a frustratingly common occurrence in the cramped cockpit, humorously termed the impossible place where all papers and pens fall to. Meanwhile, a WSO weapons system officer initiated a communication check after noticing an unusual silence from his typically talkative pilot. Officers. They literally a silent mission, and you are complaining that he's too quiet.
I mean, but yeah, it's you. When you was reading this, it's kind of like, geez, that's what you're doing. But then you think about it, it's like, your brain. You really wonder where your brain goes to when you're in like these life and death situations. I mean, literally, the man who lost his paperwork and the seat cushions was literally like almost having a panic attack. He thought he was there looking for like 10 minutes. I mean, it was only really a few seconds because, again, they're not using the autopilot feature throughout this thing. So obviously, he's not. Yeah, it's not like he's like, hey, Larry, hold the wheel steady while I look for this crap. It's that. But nerves are getting really, really tense right now, and it's just these little things that just keep popping up that the veterans remembered that happening just as they're literally about to go and face what was described as the most sophisticated air defense network in the world at this point.
Now, the mission's high stakes were underscored by the fact that the intricate Libyan air defenses allowed for only a single pass over the target areas, a tactic succinctly described by pilots with the phrase, one pass, haul ass. One pass, haul ass. This approach necessitated precision and nerves of steel, as any deviation could expose the aircraft to enhanced risk from ground-based air defenses. At approximately 01:52 a.m., as the city of Tripoli lay illuminated only by street lamps, Commander Johnson, piloting an E-2 Hawkeye, made the first visual contact and remarked, "Holy cow, this is a city that is asleep." The Libyan air defenses were not activated, unaware of the impending threats. At this crucial moment, the F-111 aardvarks descended to 200 feet above ground level, approaching from the northwest to align for their attack runs. Simultaneously, the A-7 Corsairs from the USS America, designated as the Wild Weasels for the operation, approached from the north. As the sounds of jet engines became audible, Libyan radar technicians hurriedly activated their systems. However, Corsairs quickly targeted these newly activated radar signals, launching a volley of HARM anti-radar missiles, effectively disabling most of the early warning SAM sites. Any remaining radar sites struggled to lock onto the aircraft, thwarted by superior American electronic jamming technologies. Closing in, the Corsairs fired AGM-45 Shrike missiles at the leftover SAM sites, achieving further suppression of Libyan air defenses. The success of these strikes provided significant relief to the incoming aardvark pilots, one of whom shared with his WSO a moment of levity, saying, "Boy, that gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling inside." With the path clear, the aardvarks targeted their primary objectives. The first was Bab al-Azizia Barracks, the nerve center for the Libyan military and one of Gaddafi's primary residences. This aircraft, designated as Remit 31, initiated a soft climb and released 4 GBU-10 laser-guided bombs into the main compound. The WSO, focusing intently on the target, muttered, "I've got it. Come on. Impact big time." The strike significantly damaged the barracks. As Remit 31 maneuvered away from the returning anti-aircraft fire, it broadcasted the success word, "Tranquil Tiger," to signal a successful strike.
Now, one of the sources I had was from one of the mission commanders. He wrote a book on this, Raid on Gaddafi. If you're ever able to find it, it's an older book. It was published in '92. I highly recommend it. he actually described this. What he saw was that Remnant 31 basically bombed it, made a huge, like a major tight turn, while the Libyans were literally almost had them gunning with like, just like that, tracer rounds going right toward them. It was literally a last minute goof up on the Libyan gunner that he thought they were going like this way, but they went this way, and the tracer rounds just missed them by a mile. But you can just imagine this aardvark banking really hard and just being followed by a line of tracers. I would have been like, holy shit, I'd be pissing myself or screaming with delight, one or the other.
Now, keep in mind, these aardvarks aren't like our F-18s and stuff now. They were significantly bigger because they had to carry missiles. So it's not like he has this small little fighter jet that's made to make maneuvers. These are not made to make maneuvers. They're made to do strafing runs and then slowly turn and go away and never be seen. So he's taking this fire where... and you see these tracers, one of my favorite sounds in the world. But probably one of the most scary sounds to that guy.
I can imagine him be like, ah, shit! I could just imagine the...
Sorry. I could just imagine the guy in the back going like, ah, shit!
Now, do we know that these were double piloted? Do they say that they were double piloted?
Yes, the F-111 had a two-man crew, the pilot and the WSO, who was the guy in the back guiding the missiles, calling out targets and stuff like that. And in a pinch, the co-pilot as well, because obviously they're not just going to let any old schmuck just fly in an airplane.
Yeah, so, let's see. However, not all runs were successful. Remnant 32 missed its intended drop point and was forced to abort its mission, turning towards the coast. During its retreat, it evaded 3 SAM missiles launched from the south of Tripoli, which eventually lost power and fell away harmlessly into the water. So imagine that... and they fly so long that they just lose power and... that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So somewhere in that Gulf are probably 3 SAM missiles just sitting there. Some rich man with a submarine is gonna go down and just... well, here we go again. Time for another rescue mission for another rich person. I mean, it's been a few years. We're ready for another rich man to die. Yeah. Remnant 33 faced a challenge from another launch of the same distant SAM site, causing the pilot to deploy flares and the WSO to miss the target due to the inability to lock the bombs accurately. Another aircraft, Elton 43, experienced electronic equipment failure and had to abort, veering off course. Karma 51 released its ordnance, but heavy smoke from the already struck barracks caused the bombs to miss their mark, falling short and inadvertently hitting an adjacent neighborhood. This misdirected strike unfortunately resulted in severe damage to the French embassy and the loss of approximately 20 civilian lives. Tragic outcome in the fog of war. Now, just so you guys can understand what's going on with this whole... with us saying the WSO is missing instead of the pilots, these are laser-guided missiles. So basically, the WSO has that Nighthawk in the air. He uses non-visual. You can't see it unless you're looking with like night vision and stuff. He is painting a laser onto a target. Now, nowadays, I mean, we still use it that way too, but there's also like the Air Force also has TACP, the Tactical Air Control Party, that this is their job. If this was not in Libya, if this was like in Afghanistan and stuff where we're boots on the ground, TACP would be the ones painting the target. So it literally is a laser that goes down there. That Nighthawk has to hold that laser, and then these missiles follow that laser guidance. So if the WSO can't see what he's hitting because of the smoke and everything, that's why his laser was off. The fog and the smoke will also cut that laser in half. So it doesn't fully go to the target because it can't break through that smoke.
So yeah, the WSO is in the back of this plane. That pilot is moving around, and that WSO is like trying to keep that laser steady on that target while the pilot is literally trying to dodge missiles. So I'm actually shocked I hit anything at all, right, quite frankly. That's actually a testament to the skill of these guys.
Shortly after the ill-fated run by Karma 51, another tragic incident unfolded. Karma 53, piloted by Major Fernando L. Ribas Dominici and Captain Paul F. Lawrence, was approaching Tripoli when their aircraft was likely hit by a long-range SAM missile. The plane crashed off the coast, and although both managed to eject, combination of low altitude and high speed likely prevented their parachutes from deploying properly, leading to their deaths in action. The last aircraft in their group, upon reporting the downed plane, aborted its mission and jettisoned its munitions into the sea, prioritizing the safety of its crew. So basically what happened is they said, all right, plane's been struck, we can't do this, abort mission. They have the ability to, instead of fire the missiles, they have the ability to just drop them. They open the hooks and they just drop. So what they did is they open them, drop them, and then let the plane go. Otherwise, the plane obviously will explode because it's got fuel, it's got all of that. But imagine a normal plane exploding and then having 6 or 7 of these missiles onto it. Mm-hmm. A lot more casualties can happen. So it was very smart of them to drop the missiles, eject, let the plane go, and be done. Unfortunately, they did not survive, but typically your parachute opens if you're up high enough. Now, they were on strafing runs. So again, remember, they're only 200 feet in the air. Usually when you eject like that, you're 600 to 700 feet in the air. So, and the way that these planes work, which we still use them today, is your seat actually has a parachute on the back of it that when you pull your ripcord, it ejects you from it. And then there is a ripcord that's connected to the plane that pulls the parachute and opens the parachute. But if you don't have enough height, again, they're 200 feet at the most. Now, if they were coming in to avoid SAMs, they may have been lower than 200 feet. So this parachute can't open all the way. It takes 5 to 10 seconds for a parachute to fully open. So that 10 seconds falling from 200 feet, if I remember right, it's about 10 feet a second that you fall. So it takes 10 seconds.
You already dropped 100 feet.
You already dropped 100 feet, so you're only 100 feet. That parachute does not have enough time to grab air and pull you up. So they just, and luckily for them, they did not feel it. It was death on impact. Their bodies were just done. Luckily for them, they did not feel it. They knew that they were gonna die. They knew it coming out that the parachutes didn't open. They knew they were going to die. And if I remember reading right, they had some call outs knowing that they called out and said parachutes did not open, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so unfortunately, it's the name of the game. Simultaneously, the operation against the Murat City Bilal barracks was taking place on the other side of Tripoli. This facility was known for housing and training members of various terrorist organizations, including the Red Army faction, Red Brigades, and the IRA. The anti-aircraft fire here was less intense than in downtown Tripoli, but proved to be more accurate. Jewel 61 approached its target flying perilously low at approximately 80 feet above ground level. That is way too low for a plane to be. I don't know why they were that low.
I think they saw the aircraft and they were just like, let me get low so they can aim the guns down. Dude, you're about to take out if there were trees in Libya, you were about to take it out.
Despite the precision of maneuvering, all 4 bombs released by Jewel 61 missed their intended mark, detonating harmlessly in an nearby empty field. The next aircraft, Jewel 62, had better success, striking the barracks kitchen and mess hall effectively. That's it. We're just going to starve them to death.
Could you imagine some poor sap was one that was in the mess hall just eating, and he's like, "Oh, what's that noise?"
Yeah, he's just sitting there. What?
Even funnier if it was an IRA guy who was there for training. He's like, "Jesus Christ, what's that?"
Was the IRA or Australian?
I don't know.
That was Australian. Pretty sure we're allies with Australia.
Are we?
Well, they are all like inmates there. Australia is a penal colony. Fun fact: at one time it was, and it still is. But no, he's just sitting there. Oi! I hear 3 missiles coming. So the final plane. This had likely disrupted the facility's ability to sustain its occupants and trainees. This final plane in this trio, Joule 63, also achieved its objective. As the bombs were released, the WSO dedicated the attack with a personal remark, shouting, "This one's for you, Colonel!" The strike severely damaged the barracks, classrooms, and administration buildings, impacting the operational capabilities and infrastructure of the terrorist training facility.
You just imagine the next day, all the survivors there, and be like, "I got good news and bad news, guys. What's the good news? No classes today. Yay! What's the bad news? No breakfast." Oh.
Sorry, the DFAC is closed, and we cannot give you any extra money. So you need to go to the Burger King that is really shitty down at the base. They are going to give you shitty food. They're probably going to spit in it. And it is way overpriced and eventually will burn down because apparently that's what happens to Burger Kings on every base.
Or at Hanscom, if anybody's been there when there was the Burger King, give you food poisoning multiple times.
Yep. I guess it's the same all around. Nobody gets extra BAH.
Yeah, so technically it would be BAF.
Yeah.
BAS.
Whatever. See, I guess it really depends on where you are. Because technically it's BAF, Basic Allowance for Food.
Yeah, ours was Basic Allowance for Sustenance.
And then, because BAH is housing.
Oh, yeah.
The final assault on Tripoli targeted Matiga International Airport, also known as Tripoli International Airport, which served as the main hub for all Libyan military logistical operations and the dispatch point for materials supporting terrorist activities. This airport was critical to the Libyan military's ability to sustain its operations and support networks abroad. 6 F-111 aardvarks, using the collective call sign Puffy, approached the airport from the south, having cleverly skirted around the city's air defenses by maneuvering through the desert. As they neared their target, one of the aircraft encountered a radar malfunction and had to break away from the formation, reducing their number to 5. Upon arrival, Puffy 11, leading the remaining planes, found the airport fully lit with floodlights and runway lighting, making the targets unmistakably visible. Among the aircraft spotted on the ground were several Ilyushin II-76 military transport planes. Puffy 11 targeted those transports, releasing a cluster of Mark 82 bombs equipped with parachutes to slow their descent, enhancing the precision and impact of the attack. Now, we've been using this since World War II. If you've ever seen any World War II movies and you've seen planes fly over and these things slowly dropping out with parachutes, it was the Mark 82 bombs, and they were designed to all drop together and slow the impact so that they would all hit at the same time. So instead of going boom, 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 it's literally just one cluster. And these things were so heavy that if they hit just the ground and didn't hit a target, they would leave craters into the ground. Like, I'm talking 40, 50 foot craters. These things were massive. The other planes in the formation followed suit, delivering their payloads effectively. The bombing run resulted in the destruction of 4 Ilyushin II-76s and significant damage to a 5th, severely crippling the airport's operational capabilities and reducing its capacity to support military and terrorist logistics. As the American planes withdrew, the remaining Libyan SAM sites attempted a last-ditch defense by launching missiles at the fleeing aircraft. However, none of these missiles achieve radar lock primarily due to the effective jamming and evasive maneuvers by the aardvarks. Eventually, the missiles exhausted their fuel and harmlessly plummeted into the sea once again.
Yeah, I mean, the Tripoli defense is just basically whatever ammo they had left. Keep in mind, the Libyans are panicking at this point. They don't, they've got over here. They're talking. They're all calling each other like, "What the hell's going on? What's going on?" And this is not a well-trained military. These guys make the Iraqis look like a well-trained tier 1 operators. That's how bad these guys are. So they're just shooting guns and missiles all over. They're not even bothering to get a lock. So these last missiles, there was about 5 of them that just kind of managed to get a lock and were just following until eventually they just went. Phoom.
So, around the same time as the U.S. Air Force is attacking Tripoli, the U.S. Navy strike group makes its approach to the port city of Benghazi. The group, consisting of A-6 intruders and F-18 Hornets, start to make their approaches to their targets. But unlike in Tripoli, the Libyan defenders in Benghazi are able to detect the planes on radar before the strikes occur. Due to the poor training of the radar men of the Libyan army, they fail to notify the missile site crews in time. By the time the sand batteries begin to turn on their own radar to target the planes, EA-6B Prowler planes begin to jam radars. If you've never seen a Prowler, it is a beautiful plane. We actually still have a few Prowlers. We use them sporadically, but because we have better stuff now, but we still keep the Prowlers on hand. The F-18 Hornets launch HARM missiles. I don't remember what HARM stands for. I think it's like high altitude radar or something, radar missiles, something like that, and knock out the city's radar sites, giving a clear shot to the Benina International Airport. This base was home to a squadron of MiG interceptor fighters. At around 2 a.m., 6 A-6 intruders dropped 12 Snake-Eye parachute bombs and cluster munitions over the airbase, damaging and destroying the MiG interceptors and several military helicopters. I was close. High-speed anti-radiation missiles. So it's anti-radar. Yeah. They also succeeded in cratering and disabling the runway. The Libyan air defenses are in total chaos at this point. Sand missiles are being fired wildly into the night sky, unguided, but scoring no hits onto the aircraft. The Corsair aircraft fire their short-range strike missiles and knock out the SAM sites. As the U.S. Air Force was executing its strikes in Tripoli, you doubled up. So, bear with us one second. Ben wrote this horrible. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you did. You doubled the paragraphs. The final target within Benghazi was the Jeremiah Guard Barracks. I don't know. I'm not Libyan, so they can go fuck themselves. This facility not only housed training operations for various organizations, but also contained a critical warehouse full of MiG aircraft components. 6 A6E intruders from VA-34 Squadron approached the barracks. Despite smoke from earlier attacks and active SAM sites complicating visibility, Naval Flight Officer Dean Newborn, serving as the bombardier and navigation officer in the lead plane, displayed quick reflexes. When a SAM missile was launched towards their formation, he promptly directed, "Break right!" successfully evading the missile. The maneuver, however, knocked out the plane's electronics guidance system, forcing Newborn to rely on visual cues to identify the target, which is not easy. I mean, they used to do it back in like World War I and stuff like that. Even although we were starting to bring radar guidance into World War II, depending on what planes you were in. But so it's really, and because of this, they started to train on it again, on doing visual stuff. The barracks were situated in downtown Benghazi, adding to the complexity of the mission. Despite these challenges, Newborn managed to accurately locate the target. With precise timing, he instructed the pilot during their run with stand by, before decisively calling, "Pickle!" to manually release the parachute bombs.
I have no idea why he did that. I looked it up extensively, and the only thing I can conclude, and Commander Newborn, if you're still alive and out there, A, thank you for your service, and B, we all know the stories of the Navy, but are you trying to give them the pickle, or do you want the pickle? We need to know, sir. So, he was managed to release the bombs, and the bombs released on target, and they managed to destroy the complete destruction of the barracks, training facilities, and the components warehouse were destroyed. Following this, they were able to successfully return to the carriers without any casualties. Now, as the strikes on Tripoli and Benghazi concluded, the operational dynamics for the returning aircraft varied significantly between the Naval and Air Force units. The naval planes successfully returned to their carriers without major incidents, allowing for straightforward reintegration. In contrast, the F-11 aardvarks faced a more arduous journey. They had to return back the same route that they came to RAF Lakenheath in England. This was further compounded by the fact that these pilots are now tired, and after just basically going through the most exhilarating adrenaline ride anyone's ever been on.
So yeah, I was trying to see if I could find anything on Dean Newborn, but I'd have to do a lot more research to see if I can find him. I mean, probably still alive. I mean, this was the 80s. Mm-hmm. So, and if he was one of the guys that was new, he was probably in his 20s. Mm-hmm. So should very much be alive still. Yeah. But yeah, so again, like Ben was saying, as the strikes on Tripoli and Benghazi concluded, the operational dynamics for the returning aircraft varied significantly between the Naval and Air Force units. The naval planes successfully returned to their carriers without major incidences, allowing for straightforward reintegration into the respective fleets. In contrast, the F-111 aardvarks faced a more arduous journey back to RAF, which is Royal Air Force Lakenheath in England. The return flight was compounded by the fatigue from the debating mission, and one of the F-111s even encountered mechanical difficulties, necessitating an unscheduled landing at U.S. Naval Station Rota in Spain. The one time they allow us there, I mean, you wouldn't allow us to fly over, but you'll allow us to land there now that the mission's over. Despite the loss of the aircraft designated as Karma 53 and the challenges faced during the return flight, the mission was deemed an overwhelming success. Typically, in missions that big, there's more casualties. So only having two, technically, because it was two people in the plane. So 2 casualties. That's an overwhelming success. Unfortunately, it's war. Casualties happen in war. And although we mourn the loss of the people who died, it is an overwhelming success. The strategic airstrike significantly degraded Muammar Gaddafi's capacity to support terrorist activities and inflicted substantial damage to his military infrastructure. Additionally, the operation had a profound impact on Gaddafi's international standing, diminishing his prestige and influence on the world stage. Interestingly, at the time of the raid, Gaddafi was actually in the Bab al-Azizi barracks. Unbeknownst to the American planners, he narrowly escaped harm thanks to a last-minute warning. This warning originated from a serendipitous detection of the American aircraft by the Italian Air Force off the coast of Sicily. When the Italian pilots intercepted the formation and queried for identification, they recognized the American accents. This crucial piece of information was quickly relayed up the chain of command to the Italian Prime Minister Bettino Craxi. Anticipating the strike's target, Craxi informed Malta's Prime Minister Carmenu Mifsud Bonici, who in turn alerted Gaddafi. So fuck you, Italy. We could have ended everything, killed Gaddafi in one strike, but Italy wanted to put their dick in their fucking hands, and he got warned.
I mean, when I mean like he got away with the moments, I mean it's literally minutes. Literally, Gaddafi was in his home with his family sleeping. Prime Minister Malta warns him they're coming, and then literally, boom, boom, boom. Him and his staff and his family run out. His home is blown up. I mean, it would have been horrible that we killed, his family, but hey, when you try to play basically the world's best dictator, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But yeah, and I actually looked into it. I think the reason why the Italian prime minister did this is because he was part of the Socialist Party in Italy. This man was a commie.
Yeah, so fuck you, Italy, for that. And America was not happy about that.
Sure.
I'm sure the president had a few kind words for that man. Like, hey, buddy, this whole United Nations thing? Bye. That's what I would have done. See ya.
Italy was a member of NATO at this point. I mean, we were essentially betrayed by an ally. I mean, obviously, the Italian people were not to blame. It was literally this prime minister who's like, I'm going to go warn Gaddafi because I want to keep getting my oil money.
Yeah, so, like, all of NATO, if I was members of NATO, I'd be like, bye, Italy. You need to earn back your place. So, as stated before, ElDorado Canyon was a success. The pilots of the strike group returned to Lakenheath to fanfare, and in the days and weeks following the raid, base personnel began to exhibit their enthusiasm through creating ways such as patches for the winners of the North Africa Bomb Competition 86. I want that. Also, t-shirts with the acronym LIBYA, which stood for Lakenheath is bombing your ass.
I want this.
I want this shirt. Someone find me this shirt, please.
I'm going to see if I can find it. I mean, at the very least, we can make it. The U.S. attack on Libya in 1986 received widespread international condemnation. United Nations General Assembly passed Resolution 4138 with a vote of 79 in favor to 28 against, with 33 abstentions, condemning the military strike against the Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamaah as a violation of the UN Charter and international law. Fuck all of you. Various international bodies and countries voiced their disapproval and concerns regarding the legitimacy and repercussions of the attack. Non-aligned movement condemned the attack as a dastardly, blatant, and unprovoked act of aggression. Not unprovoked, but okay. League of Arab States expressed outrage at the U.S. aggression, suggesting it introduced an element of anarchy into international relations. Go fuck yourself, ISIS.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, ISIS wasn't formed long after this, because ISIS was around for a while. They just gained power in the 2000s.
Actually, ISIS is fairly recent. The League of Arab States, this was the first, Arab UN, basically. These guys basically sponsor terrorism. The PLO, Palestinian terrorist organizations, specifically giving them shelter, money, food, whatever they needed to basically try and fuck over Israel and the West. But so yeah, basically they're talking about anarchy and international relations. Like, you are literally supporting terrorist organizations, dude. Shut up.
Yeah, so about a few years off. So 99 is really when ISIS started to form, and then they started gaining power in 2004. So African Union's Assembly of Heads of State highlighted that the deliberate targeting intended to kill Libyans violated principles of international law. Well, guess what? We weren't trying to kill Libyans. We were trying to kill bad Libyans.
Yes.
So sorry that you guys are intertwined with Libyans. I mean, we can get in this whole thing of what's going on right now in Palestine and all of that. It's kind of the same thing. It's the lesser of two evils. Do you have to make a sacrifice to get the devil out? Iran described the attack as an act of war and aggressive policy, advocating for a broad political and economic boycott of the United States. How's that working for you, Iran, now? China criticized the U.S. for violating norms of international relations and exacerbating regional tensions, just like China's been doing for how long? Listen, half these people are fucking commies.
Yeah.
Soviet Union linked the attack to a broader U.S. policy aimed at destabilizing the international situation and inflaming existing tensions. Again, commies. West Germany and France both highlighted the necessity for diplomatic rather than military solutions to international disputes, with France specifically criticizing the bombing. However, the funny part of that, as Ben was talking earlier, France is the one that wanted to fucking kill him.
Yeah.
But now they're like, well, you probably shouldn't have done that. But if we would have involved France, they would have been like, we did it. We did it. Same thing with Germany. If we would have involved Germany.
Yeah, unfortunately, Germany through the Cold War, these guys were pushovers. Germany now is starting to get their backbones again, but during West Germany, they were like, we shouldn't offend them, yeah? No, we need to be friends with everybody.
Well, here's the thing, and what a lot of people need to understand is, again, this is the 80s, this is the Cold War. Germany wants to be very careful coming off of World War II. They're so scared that because they're trying to push everything that happened during World War II with Hitler and all of that, trying to push it under the rug, trying to get rid of all of that. At this point, even during the Cold War, they're still trying to eliminate a lot of stuff that Hitler did, trying to get rid of all these swastikas that are everywhere. They're trying to just remove a lot of stuff. So they were very careful all the way up until, I mean, honestly, until the Gulf War, probably.
Yeah.
Because now we fight with Germany at this point. So up until the Gulf War, they were really trying to stay out of everything so that they can, so they can try not to have the same thing happen. Now, despite the significant military strikes on Libya in 1986, there was only a limited change in Libyan-connected terrorism in the following years. There was the Pan Am Flight 73 hijacking, which was on September 5th, 1986. There was 360 people on board, and it was hijacked at an airport in Pakistan. The standoff resulted in the deaths of 20 people, and it was reported that the Libyan government ordered the hijacking.
Yeah. And
then Gaddafi's financing of Al Rukun, which is a faction of the Chicago Black Peace Stones gang, and that was in 1986, and they were bombing U.S. government buildings. But to wrap it up, as we're running out of time here, yeah, I mean, this was a well organized and successful operation, a very great operation that really changed a lot of stuff for the Cold War at this point. So, any quick thoughts to wrap up?
So one thing that I want to make mention before we go, as of the date of this podcast, the body of Captain Paul F. Lawrence still has not been recovered. Initially, it was thought they had him, but it turned out to be Major Domenici's body that they actually recovered, that Gaddafi returned to there. Captain Lawrence has still not been returned, and what I feel is a disservice. The major and the captain were multiple times refused to be rewarded, even posthumously, the Silver Star for valor. They were only awarded the air medals, and the reason for it is so stupid. Shame on the U.S. Air Force. The Air Force wouldn't even recognize the 48th Tactical Wing for their mission, their accomplishments in there. It actually ended up being the Navy who awarded the unit medal for them.
But yeah, so that is Operation ElDorado Canyon. Once again, as we're recording on 4th of July, we want to wish everybody in America a happy Independence Day. To all of you who are not independent, go fuck off. But fun fact, though, before we wrap up, is every 6 days, from what I just read something, every 6 days, there is a place that celebrates its freedom from England. So, and it is a legit thing, and it had a map of every place that got their freedom from England. So, to all of you in England, I hope you're having fun at work today while everybody in America is off. And I mean, welcome to America.
And I hope you all have all 10 fingers at that day.
Yes. So, again, we want to thank you for listening to Scarlet Tavern. Remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, tip the bard. Good day, everybody.
Good day.